أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما بقية الله روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد في الأولين، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد في الآخرين، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد في الملأ الأعلى. أما بعد، يقول الله في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال له موسى: هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. Musa says to him, may I follow you on the condition that you teach me from that which you have been taught a sound judgment. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعجل فرجهم. The discussions in the previous nights lead us towards the understanding after these 10 nights is where we are in the position with our actions, with understanding our sin, with understanding our faults and what we need to work on in the future. The idea is that we want to perfect ourselves in the eyes of Allah, and indeed we want to have some sort of relationship and strengthen that relationship not only with Allah but also using the path which is Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli. In understanding the Imam of our time, there are many discussions that come forward. But the discussions that concern the awaited Imam, in the first glance, can be looked at to be discussions that are quite easy in the understanding that all the texts are there, all the traditions are there. It is the most written about topic within the traditions, both within our books of hadith as well as the other schools of thought. There we have accumulation of over 6,000 of the traditions that comes and talks about the reappearance or the personality or the lifestyle or the establishment within the government of the awaited Imam. Now, in discussing these aspects, there are many lenses that we can take or avenues that we can explore in trying to understand and connect with our Imam. As an example, amongst the avenues that we can tread in order to get to know our Imam is some of us would take the route of learning about, as an example, the appearance of the Imam. So as an example, you'd go towards the books, whether it be through Bihar al-Anwar, or the book of occultation, or anyone that's like it, to discuss the appearance of the Imam. And all of a sudden you begin to see that there is a reasoning behind why the appearance would be as such, who his father was, where his mother was from, what was her background, and indeed when they come together, what kind of child will be there, what is his features, will he be tall, will he be with a broad shoulder, when he appears, what's his skin color, the mole that he has on his face, is that mole on the right cheek, is it on the left cheek? When he appears, we know that he's over 1,000 years old. When he does appear, will he appear as an elderly man? Will he appear as of someone that is in his 20s? Will he appear as someone in his 30s? Will he appear as someone as his 40s? And you begin to see that we begin to delve more and more into how the Imam would appear to us, what his physical attributes are, and the extension of it. That's one angle. Another angle we can come and tackle is by looking at the signs of the time when Imam would arrive. As in, I want to look at when the Imam arrives, what will the Imam go on and do? Will he truly fight in the traditions that says that there will be bloodshed within especially those places of knowledge and seminaries where as the traditions come forward and allude to the fact that there will be blood up to the knees? Will it be bloodshed in the sense that there's traditions that come forward that suggest that the Imam will not, after taking the sword from its sheath, will not place it back in there because of what he was going to need to do? For 8 months his sword would be on his lap, and after 8 months then he conclude the warfare and place it back into the sheath, and that's when peace and prosperity starts. We come across these traditions. What are the different fitnas that will be there at that particular time? What is his movements? What occurrences happen after he arrives? Where will his establishment be? Is he married? Isn't he? So these discussions all of a sudden occur after his appearance. And there's discussions concerning his actual appearance. And there are discussions concerning the signs prior to his appearance. Now there's signs that are discussed, so many different signs that come forward. This is what the atmosphere will be like. We know for a fact that the earth will be surrounded by tyranny, by oppression. The Imam comes to relieve everyone of that and spread justice and eradicate tyranny. But now all these different signs, the understanding is it needs a very delicate approach when delving into it, because many of these signs about the Imam and the appearance of the Imam needs to be taken with, as we say, a grain of salt. It's not always exactly what is written. It may have a deeper meaning. It may have a different understanding completely, or it might need the patience for you to delve in to begin to understand what is trying to be said. As an example, amongst the traditions that are there within the books, it says that before the Imam arrives, that 2/3 in some traditions of the world's population will be eradicated. So now you're thinking to yourself, okay, do I take this in a literal sense? Or is there a different lens that I can look towards it? And if there is a different lens, where can I find these different lenses? And this is where patience comes in. I'll give you one example of how we can metaphorically look at this particular perspective. We said, when we discussed the ruh a few nights ago, amongst the things that we discussed is the different states that the soul can be in. Amongst the states that the soul can be in is a state in which Imam Amiruni says is a state of ignorance. What does ignorance, who can remember what it equals? What happens to the soul when the soul is ignorant? It is a dead soul. Ahsan, so we know everyone was listening. So a soul, if it's ignorant, soul becomes dead. So if we were to match this tradition to this tradition, and we would say maybe not in a literal manner that 2/3 of the world's population will die before the Imam comes, it could possibly, in another lens, mean that 2/3 of the population of the earth are spiritually dead because of the compound ignorance within their lifestyles. So now all of a sudden everything's on the scales of balance. Which means what? And that's why they have differentiating factors between those signs that are the major signs and those that are known as the minor signs. The minor signs, whether it happens, whether it doesn't happen, it's not a necessity for the arrival of the Imam. And they can be interpreted in one way and misinterpreted in another. That's why we have the 5 major ones. Sarkha bis-sama, when Jibreel cries out in traditions, in Laylat al-Qadr on a Friday night, the scream that everyone can hear around the world in their own mother tongues, and everyone will understand, and there will be only one scream. The Aliyun wa shi'atuhu ala al-haq. You have the Yamani as a sign, you have the Sufyani as a sign. Al-Khasf bil-Bayda, when the army of Sufyani comes between Mecca and Medina and the earth engulfs the 100,000 men army. And you also have Qatl al-Nafs al-Zakiyya, in which is the final notion after 2 weeks of which the Imam will appear. The definitive signs are there. But now, when we're delving and we understand the delicacy when it comes to discussing issues concerning the arrival of the Imam, one of the lenses that many of us have overlooked is a lens that before we even should go into delving into discussions concerning what will occur of the signs, what will occur of his appearance and after his movements, many a time we have to kind of draw ourselves backwards to learn the basics of the ghaib of the Imam. Because we have discussions concerning what is our job and requirement as Shia in the active intidar versus the passive intidar, without a shadow of doubt. But the discussion tonight is before all of that. I want each and every one of you to think about the discussion, why is the Imam in ghaibah? Because that's the first, before we even discuss the ghaibah, the question we need to actually ask ourselves is, why is the Imam in ghaibah at this very moment? What do we need to learn about the ghaibah? The first point we want to ask the question tonight that we need to learn about why the Imam is in ghaibah and what lessons can we derive from the Quran is when it comes towards the delicate nature of learning knowledge. We said how important it is, how effective it is in allowing your soul to become alive, to be awake. There's an importance. But what can we learn from the story between Nabi Allah, Musa, and Khidr? Number one. Number two, we want to look at the discussions concerning the actual terminologies that are there when it comes towards the different applications of the word ghaibah to better understand where the Imam is actually. Is he in hiding? The discussion, are we waiting for him? He's waiting for us. How can we understand through terminologies? Number three, looking at a particular book that has been published, we want to look at the connection between the ghaibah of our Imam and the ghaibahs of the prophets that were there previous and try to draw parallels between them in order for us to actually see, is our Imam the only one that was in ghaibah, or was there prophets that he preceded when we begin to recite and read that he is the inheritor of them? Has he also inherited their occultations as well, or is it a different understanding altogether? And finally, the fourth and final point on the 10th night that we are together, what are some traditions that come forward about the lessons we can learn about those that have in one way, shape or form come across the Imam of their time, to see what we can learn when we come across, inshallah, the Imam of our time moving forward. So please assist me in blessing the majlis and illuminating your hearts and minds with the recitation of 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The story between Nabi Allah Musa and Al-Abd Salih, known as Al-Khudr, Allah refers to him as Abdun min ibadina. So there's a group of them, but that's a discussion for a different night, that are doing God's work on earth that we don't necessarily know who they are, where they are, any direction, and what kind of knowledge they possess. We discussed in a few nights ago that when we spoke about the importance of knowledge and acquiring it, the discussion concerning Musa and the different types of knowledge that is there. When we said that Musa was at his highest point, where in his final, let's say, years, was asked, are you the most knowledgeable? Allah refers him to one of those whom are the servants of Allah that have more knowledge. But the discussion, look at the delicacy of it. If we really read between the lines, there's some beautiful hidden gems that we can actually reach. Amongst them is the fact when he takes his wasi, Yusha ibn Nun, to accompany him. They say they had a hoot. Hoot, if we translate it, let's say a large fish that they took with them in order for them to eat Allah says to him, go towards Majma' al-Bahrain. There, one of the signs is that Hud that you have with you will become alive. So when they went, they said that they attended that position that they were supposed to attend. In Majma' al-Bahrain, what occurred was Musa was very concentrated in finding this personality. He left the Hut with Yusha ibn Nun. They say Yusha became distracted, but he saw the miracle, the sense that the fish fell into the water, or the water touched it. The varying tradition says that they've cut the fish and they've put salt on it. Other one says they've actually already cooked the fish. But the understanding is the water touched it, or it fell in the water and it became alive again. Now, amongst the signs, Yusha, story goes on. They pass that position. Then Musa becomes hungry. He's like, where's that fish of ours? He says, oh, I forgot. By the way, it became alive and went away. He says, where? He says, well, it was just a few positions back. So they went and returned back to the place, finding Khidr. But the first thing that is a hidden gem is the fact that Musa knew of the mission. Yusha did not. Secrecy is the first notion you have to take here. Yusha didn't know. Had he known, straight away he would have been like, Musa, this is the place. As an aspect of secrecy, not everything that you know without a shadow of doubt you can give to everyone, because maybe it will do them more harm than it would do good unless you give them the beginning stages. They need to start, crawling before they start to walk, before they start to run. Such is also knowledge. You can't expect to, as an example, go into university and start doing third year units. You first have to do the first year units, get the prerequisites, understand the fundamentals, the basics, and then you go. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're always failing the third year or the fourth year units within university. Likewise, if you go towards the seminaries, they're not going to put you in Bahth al-Kharij, where you have to debate and dialogue with your ustad. You need to start slowly. Not everything can be said unless there is stages until you attend that matlab, that final notion that you're trying to attend. The second aspect of a gem within it is that it's not for everyone. Secrecy is number one. It's not for everyone. Why? Because the Quran says Yusha was left. Khidr doesn't take Musa and Yusha. He only takes Musa, says Yusha, this is not for you. So Khidr's teaching Musa a particular type of knowledge. Musa's already somewhere. He's trying to push him out. The third gem that we understand, that's not as hidden as the others, is one of the faculties when discussing knowledge is patience. Musa, a prophet of God, was not able to have the patience for that type of knowledge. He had the knowledge of Sharia, did not have the patience. That's why the 3 occasions Khidr says to him, لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. You will not have the patience with me. The fourth underlying gem, when Musa speaks towards Khidr, he says these words. He says, teach me not what you know. Sometimes we come towards someone who like, teach me everything. He says, teach me mimma ullimta rushda. Sometimes you need to be humble, in the sense that I know that, for example, a personality is in front of me, is all-knowing. You think that for a split second that he's going to teach you, it's disrespect to them to tell me everything that you know. He has his knowledge, his experience, his wisdom. That's why Musa is trying to show us one of the platforms of an aspect of respect when learning knowledge is to know where you are and where you want to achieve, and to see the stages that you need to acquire to attend it. That's why he says, in the first level, alimni mimma, from that which Allah has bestowed upon you, from this knowledge. Now, if we want to discuss Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, this is one of the notions we have to keep within our understandings when we move forward, because it's a very delicate topic. As we stated, sometimes we come across traditions, we think one way, but once it becomes clear to us there are different methodologies to think about these minor signs, it changes your complete perspective towards it. So they say, contemplate over the wording and you shall see the true lens. The wording is غيبة that we want to discuss tonight. غيبة. The other terminology I want you to all ponder about is حضور and ظهور. So what are the three words? Who's listening? غيبة. Second one? حضور and ظهور. Okay. غيبة, what is it? How can we translate غيبة? Occultation? Can we all agree? If you say something is غائب, something is hidden. Very good. Something is غائب from me, it's hidden from me. Now, the different levels of being hidden, we're going to discuss. The second word, what do we say? حضور. What does حضور mean? Present. أحسنت. Present is حضور. ظهور is what? To become apparent. Alright. Now let's put these together. We say something that is hidden is غائب. Something that is حاضر is present. And something that is ظاهر is what? Apparent. Now which of these two are opposites? What's the opposite of غيبة? Is it حضور or ظهور? Think about it. One is apparent and one is present. What's opposite to غيبة? To be present or to be apparent? If something is hidden, what's the opposite? Apparent. So now all of a sudden, can we agree that you can be both غائب and حاضر? We can, can't we? Why? Because even though he's hidden in plain sight. He can be alongside you. He can be walking on the same path for you to work. He can be crossing your path every day in the supermarkets. Could be. He could be on the plane flight with you. He could be in that elevator that you're going up towards your house. Absolutely anywhere. Why? Because he's hidden from your knowledge. You don't know it's the Imam. But does it mean that he can't be present? Doesn't. Because the opposite of a person that is ghaib is a person that is ظاهر. Once he becomes apparent, is no longer in ghaibah. And that's why we say that it's the dhuhur of the Imam. He makes himself apparent to everyone. So keep these terminologies in your mind when discussing the next aspect. There's a personality, very famous, has one of the books of traditions. His name is Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Babaway al-Qummi. 10 points, who knows who that sheikh is? Sheikh al-Saduq. 10 points. Sheikh al-Saduq. They say that once it came to him in a dream. They say, by the way, Sheikh al-Saduq, to put into perspective, he was born with the dua of the Imam. Imam comes to him in a dream. He says, it's as if I had a revelation in my dream where I saw the Imam of my time at the door of the Kaaba. At the door of the Kaaba, I see him, I send my salams, he replies my salam. He says, that was the biggest sign for me. He says, Shaykh, why do you not write a book about me? He says, Mawlana, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, I've written many books. And he says, I began to tell them I've written this book, this book, this book. This book has an aspect of it which is discussing your personality. He says, no. I want you to write a book discussing the ghaibas of previous prophets. So he says, I woke up from the dream. He says, I was overcome with, let's say, adrenaline, excitement, sadness, all mixed into one. He says, the next day I started writing the book, which we now have access to by the name of Kamal al-Din wa Tamamul Ni'mah. So this book discusses the ghaibas of previous prophets. But now, amongst the questions that we raise to ourselves, many of the prophets are discussed. We have traditions that come forward, and amongst them say the following, which is quite dangerous to think about, because these traditions come forward and say that amongst the, let's say, not signs per se, But the understanding of the Imam not coming until these criteria are met, they discuss this tradition. The tradition comes forward and says that the Imam, being the inheritor of the previous prophets and the savior to mankind, that he is the final piece of the puzzle from Adam till the protector, which is the Khatam, to establish justice on earth. He needs to meet the requirements of previous prophets. Amongst them is the lengths of their ghaibas. Now, 124,000 prophets. How many years or days or months was each prophet in ghaibah? We don't have access to that. Who has access to that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have access to that. But amongst the discussions is that he has to meet the requirements, both in its time frame as well as the subject matter of that particular ghaibah within itself. So someone comes and asks a question. Then if Allah says you have to meet the requirements of the previous ghaibahs, then you can come out of this ghaibah of yours. What's the point of us saying every time, Allahumma ajjil li waliyik al-faraj? What's the point, right? It's a question. If he has to already meet the requirements, why is it that we continuously say, Allahumma ajjil li waliyik? Question. Now the discussion surrounds this particular point. That doesn't matter if he's already finished reaching that same amount. Allah, with His Majesty, could say, you know what? He's met the requirements. I'm going to keep him there for another 1,000 years. Another 2,000 years. The fact that we all come together in dua, we're asking Allah that extra time after he meets the criteria. If you thought, I want to keep him for another 1,000, 2,000 years, that you minimize that period. That as soon as he meets the criteria, we want him to come to eradicate this world from injustice and tyranny. Very delicate point. That's why I need your patience with me. But it's a hadith that is under discussion. But it's there. Amongst the traditions that come forward is our Imam Sadiq alayhi afdal as-salati was-salam. Now there's many traditions about the ghaibah of our Imam. Many. Amongst these traditions, the Imam comes forward and says, the ghaibah, or there is a sign, sunnah, that our awaited has with 4 prophets. He says, sunnatun min Rasulillah, was sunnatun min Isa, was sunnatun min Musa, was sunnatun min Yusuf. These are the 4. In this tradition. There are other traditions. He says, Amma sunnat Rasulullah, the sunnah that he is going to follow, the exact sunnah of Rasulullah, is the way that he preaches the huda. Meaning that Rasulullah, the way that he preached, some of it was speaking to people, gifting them the opportunity with his guidance, with his words, with his wisdom, with his mercy. They came to Islam. But others tried their utmost to destroy Islam, and that's why he has to pick up the sword, like Rasulullah picked up before him. Sunnah. It says, Sunnatun min Isa is that they will say about him what they said about Jesus, son of Mary. And so we have the tradition from Rasulullah about Amir al-Mu'mineen, the same aspect. He says you have a sunnah of Isa as well. Because just like Isa was called a Lord, wal-iyadhu billah, likewise there were people that called you a Lord, O Ali. And that's why he has the famous tradition, Ya Ali, lawla an aqulu fika ta'ifatun, lawla an akhaf an taqula fika ta'ifan min ummati. If I was not afraid that a group of people will say about you what the Christians said about Jesus, son of Mary. لولا أن أخاف أن تقول فيك طائفة من أمتي ما قالته النصارى في عيسى ابن مريم لقلت فيك كلمة لا تمر بها على ملأ إلا وأخذوا من ترابنا عليك ومن طهورك ما يستشفون به ولكن حسبك. He says, if I say this word, people will think that you are a Lord. Not only that, they will take from the dust of your feet and your ablution what they will take as a source of blessing for them. ولكن حسبك. It's sufficed. أنك مني وأنا منك. It's sufficed that they understand that I am from you, O Ali, and you are from me. It's sufficed. He says the second sunnah is the sunnah that's comparative between the awaited and Isa, that when he arrives, people will see the miracles that he performs and the knowledge that he brings and the persona that he brings, then they will begin to call him that which the Christians called Son of Mary. The third is Musa. They say the comparison to Musa is خائفا يترقب, meaning, you know the verse within the Holy Quran that says وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنَ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. They say amongst the examples within the Quran is Nabi Allah Musa when he was treading very carefully not to allow any of his enemies an upper hand to attack him, to harm him, to kill him. They say likewise the sunnah of Musa upon our Imam is like that he treads in an aspect of being in occultation, that he does not allow anyone of his enemies to have an upper hand, that they may find him in a position that they will attack, kill or harm him. Same sunnah. Sunnah of Yusuf is ghaiba. How is Yusuf in ghaiba is question. That's the discussion tonight. How can we compare the ghaiba of our Imam to the ghaiba of Yusuf? Because if you really look at it, you begin to see very clearly how the Imam is so close to us, but we do not understand. Yusuf had layers upon layers upon layers of ghaibas. The first ghaiba that we have within the Holy Quran. I'm going to read the verse and I want you to contemplate over it before I explain it, to see which ghaiba it was. The first one, all from Surah Yusuf. That's why Allah says, we give you the best of stories to learn from. Ayah number 9, Surah Yusuf. اقتلوا يوسف أو اطرحوه أرضا. Who says this? Kill Yusuf. Who says this? Brothers. Question. If his brothers knew that Yusuf was a prophet, would they try to kill him? The reason why they tried to kill him is what? Not because he was a prophet. What was he? Jealousy. They were saying that our father gives him more attention than us. And I'll get to the second point. Why they didn't kill him? Because they thought he was a prophet. Because his prophethood was sealed from them. When Yusuf says to his father, إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ رَأَيْتُهُمْ لِي سَاجِدِينَ. What does his father say to him? Do not لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك. Do not tell them this dream, lest they know. Number one, they didn't know his position, so his personality and status in the eyes of Allah was hidden. Ghaiba. Agreed? Now, if they knew he was a prophet, in the second verse, وَاشْتَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْصٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَ. Question. If they knew he was a prophet, the Quran says they sold him for a few coins. As if you captured a prophet, all jokes aside, do you think you're going to be selling him for a few coins? True? You're like, I don't want to comment on it. It's a very interesting discussion. But you wouldn't be selling him for a few coins, less selling him in the first place. Ghaiba. If they knew, they hidden. He goes on. قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. Not only is he physically no longer be seen, now there's a second layer of ghaiba, where he's in prison. People don't even see him. So what example can we derive here? Very, very important. That during his time in prison, was he or was he not preparing those that will be alongside him in his governorship? Question. Wasn't he? So then, does that mean my Imam can be hidden from me, but also preparing for his government? It does, doesn't it? Ghaiba, the example, as Imam Sadiq says, is that of Yusuf. Now, the next one is very interesting. وقال الملك ائتوني به فلما جاءه الرسول قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة التي قطعن أيديهن. So the Malik, the king of the time, says that this is a person that can interpret my dream. Go and bring him for me. I need to have him by my side. Look at what Yusuf says. He says, no. First, a truth needs to be revealed. Then I will come. That's why when we come towards establishing the platform, or trying to establish the platform for the Imam to come, it needs to be built on truth, not falsehood. The truths need to be relayed. Sometimes we think to ourselves, yes, there's red lines. Unity is a pivotal point in the Islamic nation going forward, without a shadow of doubt. It has its importance, it has its positions, but people have misinterpreted that as hiding the truths that we have. No, the truth is at the center of everything. We don't want 20, 30 years down the line someone's going to come and ask, how did Fatima die? Because we are too wary about how others will take. There's a respectful way to say it without a shadow of doubt. But does that mean I need to hide the truth, hide my belief, hide who I am, hide what I believe in, who I respect? Yusuf says, no. Before I come out of my ghaiba and sijn, I need the truth to be apparent to everyone before I rise. And it's our jobs and our obligation as followers to be responsible for spreading the truth without a shadow of doubt. Not just verbally, but the truth in our akhlaq, our actions, our interactions. We will be, as Imam Sadiq again would say, du'atun lana bighayri alsinatikum, messengers without the use of your tongues. And the final notion that I want to discuss is that many of us will think that the Imam, if I do something that's bad, how does it hurt him? How does it affect him? If I listen to that which I'm not allowed, walk towards with these feet places where I am looked down upon by the Imam, hang out with those people that get me further away from Allah rather than closer towards Him, engage in activities that no word of Allah is mentioned, or Ahlul Bayt, or anything to do with religion, but rather the absolute opposite. We think to ourselves, when we do things that the Imam, who are we to the Imam looks towards us? Let's look at the ghaiba of Yusuf. قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. The brothers, once he places that cup within his brother's bag, they found the cup, and then they all of a sudden, they say to Yusuf, not knowing it was him, if he's stolen, he had a brother that stole before him. If you know the story of Yusuf and how they tried to frame him. What does the next line say to tell each and every one of us that the Imam sees, hears and feels? It says, فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. He says it hurt him. Yusuf, upon hearing this, hurt him. But he kept it secret within himself. Kept it hidden within himself. You see, the understanding we need to take from tonight, we've understood the terminologies. We've understood the fact that without a shadow of doubt, the Imam of our time can be anywhere around us. We need to always be on our best behavior now all of a sudden, don't we? That he can be in ghaibah, but also by our side. In this majlis, outside in the car park, on our way to work, anywhere. You know, our understanding is always that we always want to meet the Imam of our time. We stated a few days ago, there were 30,000 that met the Imam of their time. Did it make a difference to them? No. Because they weren't prepared when they met the Imam to support truth against falsehood. There's a story that is said amongst the scholars about a personality that asked, he says, how can I meet the Imam of my time? So this scholar says, you know what, have a sincere heart. These are the set of actions that you can do to purify yourself. He gives him a set of actions, Salat al-Layl, these particular tasbih, this is particular dua, and ask Allah that He allows you to see the Imam of your time. He says, I've tried this 8 months. Do not go past until whoever practices this will see the Imam without a shadow of doubt. He says, okay. So 8 months, truly enough, he practices every day, practices, does everything to a T, asks Allah. Okay. 8 months go, 9 months, 10 months. Goes back to the scholar. He says, Baba, you said it's been tested. Everyone's seen him. He says, yeah. He says, what happened? He goes, I haven't seen him yet. He goes, okay, I'll answer your question, but before I have a question for you. He says, what's the question? He says, I heard of a commotion that occurred in the wudu area within your mosque, Sayyid. He says, yeah, how'd you hear about it? He goes, I have my ways. News travels fast. He says, well, I'm a bit embarrassed to say what occurred. He says, no, just tell me. I just want to know from you exactly what happened. He says, well, we were on the chairs where we were sitting to make our wudu, and he says, all of a sudden, I'm the Imam of the masjid. He was a Sayyid, black turban. He says, we're all preparing ourselves to make wudu. While we're preparing ourselves to make wudu, he says, people are on the right, on the left, we're talking, we're joking. He goes, a man sat next to me, and then as I'm making my wudu, he looks at me and says, Sayyidna. He says, you know, you're making wudu. He says, but I can see that on your hand, your ring is a bit tight on your finger. He says, I know, but when you're making wudu, sometimes not all the water travels, as I understand it. So either you move your ring that's tight, or try to take it off, even better, so that the water can travel upon your hands to every single place. So he says, I'm in a position where everyone's looking at me. I'm the Imam of the masjid. Everyone prays behind me, asks me. He says, who's this man that comes and asks, tells me what to do? He says, I got a bit angry, abrupt, became a little bit verbal, loud in the noise that I was replying to him. And the man's like, he was very polite about it. He's like, no, I didn't mean any disrespect, Sayyid. I was just telling you that as far as I know, this is what you should do. Yani. I didn't mean any form of disrespect. So he says, as I'm saying this to the scholar, the story, he says the scholar begins to shed a tear. He says, why are you crying? Like, I'm the one that's embarrassed. He says, you should be embarrassed. He says, why? He says, that was your Imam. He says, that was my Imam. He says, that was your Imam. He came to you, but you were not prepared. You had a disease, a weed within the garden, which is your soul. You needed to cut that out. Rajab Ali al-Khayyat, in his famous story, the Imam comes to him. You know what he says? He says, follow in our footsteps. You don't have to try to come and find us. We will come towards you. Can you imagine your Imam coming to visit you? He says, yeah, just do what we tell you. Stay away from that which is haram and enjoy that which is halal. Ma'ruf munkar. Very simple, he says. But how difficult its application. Are our souls ready? That is the question. There were only 72 in Karbala. They were ready to sacrifice everything for Allah. 30th majority that fought the Imam weren't ready, were they? There's a moment in Karbala. Tonight is one of the last nights we're together. One of the last opportunities to be able to shed a tear that Allah says has the power to forgive all our sins. Tonight could be that night that our life changes because of that tear. They say there's a moment in Karbala where Imam Hussain would return back from when his back was broken. That moment, he looks left, he looks right. Every one of his companions have fallen. He looks towards the tents. Inside, he can see Qasim laying there, lifeless. Inside, he can see Ali al-Akbar cut up into pieces. He pans his eyes on the battlefield. He sees one of the flags that have been fallen, that once the hands that held them are now severed on the floors in Karbala. They say he would go around the tents listening towards the cries of the women and the children, saying, Al-Atash, 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 Al-Atash. Oh Aba Abdullah, the thirst, the thirst. 3 days in the heat of the sun, in the deserts, wanting to quench their thirst with a drop of water. Imagine the heart of mercy listening to this. He sees there's no reason left for him not to fight any longer. Everyone has fallen. Now it becomes his moment in war to go towards the battlefield. As he's embracing his woman, as he's embracing his young daughters, he goes towards Sukaina, embraces her, embraces Ruqayya. He speaks towards Zainab. Then he says, while he's discussing with Zainab, Zainab, is there anything that I need to do before I go? She would say this line. I want you to imagine, she would say, oh Aba Abdullah, you have a 6-month-old in the tent. His mother, Rabab, she's very embarrassed to tell you. But now the milk within her bosom is dried. This 6-month-old of yours had not suckled any milk for a period of time now. And all of a sudden now he's thirsty. Oh Aba Abdullah, ala min sharbatin min ma. Will they give this 6-month-old water? He says, bring me my 6-month-old, O Zainab. I want you to think to yourself, at this very moment, I want you to close your eyes and truly imagine the body of a 6-month-old. Just imagine. A body with its soft skin, with its delicate cheeks. But now I want you to imagine a 6-month-old's face where its eyes has sunken into its sockets. I want you to imagine a lip of a 6-month-old that is broken because of how dry it is. Now I want you to also imagine the movement that this 6-month-old is making. The traditions say, Kana yataladha atashan. You know what that means? When you raise a fish out of water, you know that movement that a fish makes? Kana yataladha atashan. They say that Aba Abdullah, when he used to come towards the battlefield, he would either come on a horse or on a camel. Whether he'd come on a camel, then he would preach to the people. When he would come on a horse, he's on fighting mode. They would say that they're now looking at Aba Abdullah walking towards the enemies. But how was he walking? They would say that we saw Aba Abdullah, very strangely, that he had something under his garments. He says he walked very slowly towards us, without a horse, without a camel, barefoot, coming towards us. We said, what's going on that Aba Abdullah has come on his feet? Has he tried to surrender? We can see that everyone has fallen. It's only him that remains on the battlefield. They would say, as we gaze upon Aba Abdullah, all of a sudden we realize that he was trying to protect a young baby from the heat of the desert with his garments. They would say he would take out a 6-month-old and say the words, saying to them, if there is a sin for the elders, what sin has this 6-month-old committed? He says, O army of Ibn Sa'ad, ala min sharbati ma. Will you not give this 6-month-old a drop of water to quench his thirst? He doesn't have a sin. If we have sinned and you say that we are on the wrong path, then what does this 6-month-old have of a sin that you do not give him a quench his thirst? They would say that Imam Hussain would do something that no one's done. He would say, if you're afraid that I bring him towards the water, I'll put him on this hot desert sand. You come and take him. Take him. If you're afraid that I will drink, you come and take him. Give him water because he's about to die from thirst. They would say the army would split into two. The army, half of them would say, why do we not give this 6-month-old water? What has he done? What harm can it do that we give this 6-month-old water? What kind of hearts do we have? The other side, what would they say? They would say the lines, فلا تبقوا من أهل هذا البيت من باقية. Kill them all. Do not even allow a 6-month-old to survive this battle if he is the son of Hussein. So the army become, it's a motion where they fight amongst one another. Umar ibn Sa'd, who does he look towards? He says, Harmala, I need you to stop them fighting. He says, how? He says, make sure you strike either Hussein or you strike the 6-month-old, but make sure that you quickly, before the army revolts upon us. Harmala, when he has been captured, they ask him, Harmala, what did you do in Karbala, Harmala? He would say, amongst the arrows that I struck, there were 3 that I knew that hurt Abu Abdullah. Which 3? He says, the first one that I knew hurt Abu Abdullah was the one that struck the eyes of Abbas. He says, I saw the pain in Hussein when it struck the eyes of Abbas, and he could not remove it, because how can he without a right or a left? He said, the second that I knew hurt Abu Abdullah is the one that struck Abu Abdullah in his heart, that he struggled and struggled, that he could not remove it. He had to remove it from his back until the blood of his heart would gush. He said that hurt him. But the one that hurt everyone was the third one, Harmala. Which one was the third one that hurts everyone? He would say, the one that I struck then. He says, as I struck that arrow, I pointed the 3-pointed arrow that we use to kill camels with. I want you to imagine a 3-pointed arrow. And on this other notion, I want you to imagine how small is the neck of a 6-month-old. He says, I struck that arrow in the sky, and it becomes going slowly down. When it's coming down, he says, I saw Hussein lifting a 6-month-old towards the heavens, that we began to see the armpits of Hussein. That's how high he lifted Aliyun al-Asghar. He says, as he lifted him to the skies, he says that 3-pointed arrow would go inside the delicate neck of Aliyun al-Asghar, and it would come out the other side of its neck. I want you to imagine a 6-month-old not knowing, feeling the pain. All of a sudden, his hands and his feet would become in a state when it would flutter and flutter. It's as if he's saying, Hussein, my father, Abu Abdullah, I'm in pain. Where is this pain from? Hussein, help me, father. He would continue to flap his hands, flap his feet. I want you to imagine that arrow that pierced the neck of Aliyun al-Asghar also pierces the hands of Imam al-Hussein. In that final notion, they would say as his hands would flap and flap, he would look towards the eyes of Hussein. In the final movement, he would hug and embrace his father, Abu Abdullah. Hussein, I want you to imagine Abu Abdullah in the middle of the battlefield, looking towards a 6-month-old that moments ago had life within him. Now he looks at him. What kind of vision do you have, oh Abu Abdullah, that you hold in your hand the head of your Asghar with an arrow in its neck? What happened to you, Hussein? He's thinking, do I now bury Asghar here? Do I take Asghar back towards the tents? I want you to imagine Hussein in that moment, thinking, what do I do? What can I do? They would say that he slowly goes towards the tents, but he would hide Aliyun al-Asghar under his garments. And in front of the tent, he's walking up and down in front of the tents. You know, the first person that comes is a young daughter by the name of Sukaina. Look what Sukaina says. If your heart are not broken now, look at what Sukaina says. This will break your heart. She says, Father Hussein, I do not hear him crying anymore. Have they given my brother water?
Father Hussein, have they given my brother water? Because I do not hear him crying any longer. Aba Abdullah, he would remove his garments to a 6-month-old with an arrow piercing his neck. Sakina would say, Father, what do you show me? Father, hide him. I cannot bear looking towards my brother. Who can handle this? He would say, bring me the heart of the one person that can handle this. Who's this one person? He would say, bring me Zainab. Zainab would come. He would say, Zainab, take Asghar Zainab. She would say, Brother Hussein, what's this that you've given me? Aba Abdullah, how do I take it back towards Rabab? I want you to imagine the last moments. Imam Hussain, before he goes towards the battlefield, they would say there's only one person that he buried in Karbala. But how did he bury Asghar? I want you to imagine a father burying a 6-month-old with an arrow in his neck. How did he remove the arrow from his neck? How did he bear digging the sand and placing that delicate body in the hot Arabian sands in Karbala? How, Hussein, did your heart allow you to look at his beautiful face and place the sand on his face? Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ala Muhammadin ay munqalabin yanqalibun wal 'aqibatu lil muttaqin. Ya Hussein,